Помогите мне! Помогите мне!
Oh, a remarkable change.
This is Leonid Greiser, who is on trial in Russia for the fatal stabbing of his own sister, Ariana Korol. The 18-year-old admitted to the heinous crime following his arrest by law enforcement in Moscow, asserting that Satan commanded him to commit the act. The dangerous murderer is held in a secure glass cage in Shcherbinsky District Court for the duration of the trial to ensure the safety of the guards, court personnel, and other civilians. Greiser approaches the narrow, open panel of the cage, and there's a brief verbal interaction with the courtroom guard. Subsequently, he retreats behind the tinted window but abruptly halts, a moment of realization crossing his face. With full determination, he bends down, extending his hands through the narrow window, grasping the outer panel in an attempt to maneuver his upper body through. Regrettably for him, his head is too large to fit, so instead he leans back and swings his right leg out of the window, hoping to exit feet first. The female guard intervenes, reaching through the window to grasp his leg, prompting Greiser to move back to the center of the box, eluding the officer's reach. Suddenly, he shifts his focus upward, searching for an alternative escape route within the box. Seeing that the situation was about to escalate further, the male courtroom officer beckons him back toward the access window to divert his attention. They talk for a minute, and Greiser appears to calm down. However, just as it seems that peace is restored, the situation takes an incredible turn. Greiser leaps onto the low bench in the cage and begins to squeeze his way up through an extremely narrow gap between the ceiling slats. Although initially seemingly unconcerned, officers stand by as Greiser ascends through the top of the box. As his head displaces a ceiling tile, the guards realize the gravity of the situation. Observe as the three officers attempt to climb up to reach Greiser as his body vanishes through the courtroom ceiling. Despite his legs being held by two guards and beaten with a baton by the third, Greiser continues to ascend, wriggling so vigorously that his pants come off into the hands of one of the officers. Additional guards arrive for support as Greiser, anxious about the approaching taser, dislodges two ceiling tiles from the attic side.
Помогите! Помогите мне! Помогите мне! Помогите мне! Дайте мне руку!
The guard continues to wave the taser near Greiser's leg, and he starts to descend back through the ceiling, bringing a tangle of wires and tiles with him. Eventually, Greiser lowers himself back into the cage, pulls his pants back up, and the hearing continues with him in handcuffs to prevent any further escape attempts. The audacious defendant was ultimately found guilty of the murder, and he told the court that he had no regrets about what he did as he was sentenced to mandatory psychiatric medical treatment. The case of Keeson Wilkins might just be the most theatrical yet. Wilkins is self-representing in an Ohio courtroom, facing numerous charges of assault and weapons violations linked to the 2004 shooting. The first day of the trial was marked by drama, with the judge having to evacuate the courtroom multiple times due to Wilkins' actions. The second day is already off to a rocky start. The proceedings commence with the judge inquiring if Wilkins has any witnesses present in court that day.
Wilkins, do you have any witnesses here present today?
Wilkins responds in the negative. He informs the judge that he requires more time to assemble his defense, to which the judge reprimands him, reminding him that he had months to prepare.
You've had months to research this matter. This is why I suggested to you that you have counsel.
Unwilling to grant Wilkins any additional time, the hearing moves forward, and the prosecution summons a police officer to the stand as a witness. Once they have finished their questioning, Wilkins begins his cross-examination, and what happens next is truly unbelievable.
Your Honor, excuse me for a second. I need some time.
Observe again as Wilkins collapses to the floor and court deputies hasten to his assistance. Already acquainted with Wilkins' penchant for drama, the judge seems unfazed, and she calmly orders for the courtroom to be cleared once more. The officers, who are trained medics, hoist him back up into his chair, and a nurse examines him. finding nothing amiss. Notice here how Wilkins sits slouched in the chair, seemingly unconscious, as the judge requests for it to be recorded that his breathing appears to be normal and he seems to be pretending to be asleep. The situation grows even more peculiar as a deputy waves smelling salts under Wilkins's nose.
A remarkable change.
This prompts him to abruptly throw his head backwards and make a miraculous recovery from his feigned heart attack. The judge continues with the hearing as Wilkins remains seated in his chair with his head thrown back, and she chastises him for his ongoing disruptive behavior. Despite being deemed healthy, Wilkins is eventually lifted from the seat and wheeled out of court. In the end, his behavior did him no favors, and he is sentenced to 42 years in prison. Hold your breath as you witness Daniel Nicholson's audacious attempt to elude the scales of justice. The 35-year-old Nicholson is making an appearance at Christie's Beach Magistrates Court in Adelaide, South Australia, for a bail hearing concerning weapons offences and driving charges that he is currently facing. He has an extensive history of minor criminal activities and substance abuse. Prior to attending court today, he indulged in methamphetamines. As Magistrate Sue O'Connor declares that Nicholson's bail is being rescinded, the drug-induced defendant rises and implores her, raising his hands in the air. Nicholson was anticipating departing the court on bail again today. He is displeased to learn that this will not be the scenario. The judge instructs him to take a seat, but Nicholson becomes increasingly irate and agitated, as shocking as Nicholson's earlier conduct has been. Suddenly, the situation takes a more dramatic twist. A sheriff's officer enters the dock to manage the situation and pacify Nicholson. But instead, Nicholson springs up onto the side of the dock, attempting to scale over the glass panel at the top. Two officers seize him in an effort to bring him down, and he grapples with one of them, locking arms as he tumbles back into the dock. He swiftly rebounds and vaults to the dock, landing on the desk. As a police prosecutor wrestles him to the ground, his pants are pulled down in the process. Observe again as Nicholson moves with extreme force and speed to escape from the dock. It doesn't conclude there, and the struggle persists across the floor of the courtroom. Nicholson's supporters, who are seated in the hall outside, storm the courtroom. One woman is cradling Nicholson's young son in her arms, and she implores the guards for mercy. You can hear her here screaming and pleading that Nicholson is a sick man. Officers eventually restrained Nicholson, placing him in handcuffs. Two of the sheriff's officers involved were injured. Nicholson was incarcerated for at least 12 months for the escape attempt, the judge advising him to mature, get clean, or face many more years behind bars. While actions like Nicholson's can be rationalized by a desire to evade imprisonment, certain conduct by defendants in court is so peculiar that it defies any logical explanation, as in the case of Christopher Teal. Teal is making an appearance before Superior Judge Karen Donahue in the King County Courtroom, Seattle. The 26-year-old is facing charges of rape and unlawful imprisonment. This follows an incident where it was alleged that he trailed a woman into the restroom at a car dealership, locked her in a cubicle, and sexually violated her. The victim had left her car for servicing just moments before the assault, which was only halted when dealership employees forced their way into the cubicle and pulled Teal, who stands at 6'3" tall, off the woman. Teal's conduct in custody has been unpredictable up to this point, and he has been implicated in a number of violent incidents, including an attempt to headbutt a detective who was interrogating him about the incident at the car dealership. A psychiatric assessment that was carried out determined that he was capable of comprehending the criminal charges that have been leveled against him. The psychologist concluded that he might be simulating the symptoms of a psychiatric disorder. So today he's in court for a competency hearing. Observe his demeanor as he enters the courtroom and looks around in an apparently bewildered state. His court-appointed attorney, Reed Birkland, stands beside him. Teal's handcuffs are removed by the jail guard, and the defendant continues to look around in a perplexed manner. As the prosecutor initiates initiates the hearing, Teal extends his arm towards his defense attorney, and the court officer pulls his arm down and instructs him to remain still. What happens next is truly unbelievable. Teal laughs, and then, without any warning or provocation, he turns to Birkeland again and strikes him sharply. In case you missed it, here it is again. Watch as one court officer immediately seizes Teal by the back of the head, while the other holds him by the shoulders as they bring him to the ground. This officer eventually manages to get the cuffs back on the 250-pound man, and another officer calls to the back of the courtroom for an attendant to bring a restraint chair to strap Teal into.
Bring the chair. Bring the chair.
There aren't any restraint chairs available, but the officers place a spit hood over his head, and he's escorted from the courtroom. Birkeland declines to press charges, but he withdraws himself from the case. But the madness doesn't end there. 2 weeks later, Teal's back in the courtroom, again for another competency hearing. This time, officers are taking no chances, and he's wheeled in front of the judge, strapped into a restraint chair. Before the hearing concludes, Teal interrupts, and unbelievably, he proceeds to complain loudly about the fact that his hair is short in his mugshot.
I'd like to know where the they got that photo of me with my short hair. Because that was on Facebook, and I don't have a Facebook.
Teal again shouts over him, asking nonsensical questions.
Legitimate questions. Like, do they have access to Google?
Teal is eventually deemed competent to stand trial, and after being found guilty, he's sentenced to 8.5 years to life for his crimes.